Back when I was a teenager, I used to play for our high school football team, at least until my leg got broken in 2 places during an away game. I was tackled by 2 players, and in the process, one of them accidentally fell with his knee coming down right onto my shin. It broke both my tibia and my fibula, and was probably the most pain I had ever experienced so far in my life. But somehow, it wasn't the most traumatic memory to come from that situation. You see, since the game took place at 6 p.m., by the time I got to the hospital, it was already after 9, and due to the severity of the break, the doctor suggested that I be kept overnight so that they could perform the surgery right away the next morning. This sounded like really good news at first, but it wasn't until I was being wheeled into my room that we were informed that the hospital was a bit full at the moment, and I was going to have to share my room with another patient. I honestly didn't mind at first. I was hoping to just get some sleep and get fixed up in the morning. And when I got into my room, I saw that the other patient was already asleep, so I figured that it wouldn't be an issue for me. I told my parents that it was all right if they wanted to go home, and they spoke to the doctor and figured out what time they would have to be back in the morning before wishing me a good night and heading off. It only took me about an hour to fall asleep, and by then the pain in my leg had subsided thanks to the medication that they had given me. I don't really remember them, but I was having really vivid dreams that night before I was woken up by the sound that was coming from across the room. I figured it was one of the doctors or nurses checking in on us, so I didn't pay any mind. But as I tried to get back to sleep, I swear I could hear what sounded like heavy breathing. The hairs on my arms and legs started to stand up as chills began to roll over my body. I don't know how I could tell, but without even opening my eyes, I could feel that someone was staring at me. I let out a scream as I opened my eyes and saw a man with what looked like bloodshot eyes standing over my hospital bed. When I screamed, the man jumped back a bit, but he just continued to stare. I tried to yell out for help, but no words were coming. I looked around at the room and saw that the bed next to mine was empty, and realized that this must have been the other patient that was in the room. I locked eyes with him, not knowing what I should do and just hoping for the doctor to arrive. The man took a step toward me and placed his hand on the side of my bed, which caused me to once again let out a quick scream like a gasp, to which the man responded by mimicking the noise over and over again as he slowly leaned in closer and closer to me. I didn't want to hit the man, but I was very uncomfortable at this point and began balling up my fist. Thankfully, a doctor as well as 3 nurses came rushing into the room and pulled the man away from me. The doctor explained that he had dementia and was there getting checked for cancer. He likely woke up and was having a fit of sorts and didn't have the slightest idea about what was going on around him. The doctors ended up finding another room that they could move me to and let the man have the room to himself, both for his own safety and for the safety of others. I didn't get any more sleep that night. I was too shaken up, but once I was put into a different room, I was able to at least get comfortable while I waited for my parents to return and for the surgery in the morning. My leg healed just fine, but I don't think I will ever be able to get the image of the man just staring down at me as I slept out of my head. When I was 22 years old, I was at work at the movie theater when I suddenly had this agonizing pain in my stomach and lower back, which ended up causing me to collapse as I was sweeping up after a showing. I ended up having a coworker take me to the hospital, only to discover that I needed to have my gallbladder removed. Now, I hated the hospital, so the idea of needing surgery, let alone having an organ removed, was something that freaked me out beyond belief. The doctor and surgeon were both really comforting though, and reassured me that it was a fairly simple procedure and that I would be just fine. The time came for my surgery, and after being placed under anesthesia, I passed out. And the next thing I knew, I was waking back up in my hospital room with the surgery being a success. A minute or two after waking up, a nurse came in and asked me how I was feeling. I told him that I was feeling fine, aside from being a little lightheaded. The nurse told me that it was totally normal to feel a little lightheaded, and that it was the anesthesia wearing off. He let me know that the doctor would be coming in soon to check on me and to sit tight. That's exactly what I did. At that point, I was feeling really lightheaded, so I decided to just lay my head back and relax. But after a couple minutes, any hope of relaxing began to fade away as I started to feel a sharp pain overcome what seemed like my entire torso. I started having a difficult time breathing and quickly began hyperventilating once I started to panic. The pain in my chest started getting sharper and sharper, and by the time the doctor walked into the room, everything around me was starting to spin. I could hear him ask me if I was alright, but I couldn't find the words, and the last thing I remembered was him calling for help from other staff members. They apparently had to grab a defibrillator and use that to restart my heart. I woke up a couple hours later and was informed that I had an allergic reaction to the anesthesia. According to the doctor, it was a really severe reaction that ended up sending me into cardiac arrest. The doctor said that the heart monitor that I was attached to must have been malfunctioning, and there was a good chance that I had been having a heart attack since I had woken up from surgery, and that's why I felt so lightheaded. I ended up being fine when all said and done, but they needed to keep me for another day and night to monitor me and that there wasn't any long-lasting underlying effects from the allergic reaction. I haven't had surgery since then, and I hope I never need it again. There's really never a slow night when you're working overnight at a hospital. I mean, sure, some are less intense than others, but the patients never really stop coming in. And because of that, after working years as a doctor, the days sort of begin to blend together. The only thing that typically separates them from any other day on the shift is a unique patient. Though, there was one day that I'll never forget, and it's not because of my patients. It was while I was still working at Tampa General in Florida. It was about 12:30 in the morning, and I was about halfway through my shift. I stopped into a patient's room as I was making my rounds to check in on them, and after taking a look at the monitor and running a few quick exams, I saw that they were a bit dehydrated from the medication that we've been giving them. So I went and grabbed a fresh bag for the IV drip and began hooking it up. While I was doing that, I started to notice people shuffling around in the hallway out of nowhere. I just assumed that a patient had come in that was in critical condition and needed help quickly, but when I stepped back out into the hallway, I quickly realized I was wrong. As soon as I popped my head out of the patient's room, I noticed that everyone that was running through the halls was rushing into various rooms. I was really puzzled by this, so I continued to look around. That was when another doctor came around the corner of the door and rushed into the room before closing it. I asked them what was going on, and that was when they informed me that there was an active shooter in the building. My eyes widened as fear began to course through every bone in my body. We had trained for this, but never in my life would I have thought that I would be put in this sort of situation. We both made sure that the door was secured and then checked on the patient and informed them of the situation and tried to calm them down while also keeping ourselves calm. After about a moment of being locked in that room, it was as if a blanket of silence had fallen over the hospital. Every moment that passed by felt like an hour, and all we could hear were the sounds of certain machines running in other rooms. Then my heart practically stopped as I heard what was without a doubt the sound of footsteps slowly making their way down the hallway. We all held our breath as they slowly passed by our door, but we were all terrified at the sound of whoever it was stopping just a little bit down the hall past the room we were stashed in. I heard the sound of fumbling at the desk that they must have stopped at, and after a couple of minutes, they turned and I could hear them walking back in our direction. Once again, we held our breath as whoever it was walked past our room, only this time they kept going for a bit longer before stopping. But once they stopped, we heard the unmistakable sound of someone slamming against one of the hospital room doors, which was followed by the sound of 3 gunshots. The 3 of us that was hiding in the patient's room couldn't help but let out a gasp or scream before realizing that we should still be quiet. By that time, there was more of a commotion out in the hallway, and we could hear the sound of someone yelling. After listening closely to the yelling, I could tell that the police had finally arrived. The sound of officers began flooding the hall, and in no time at all, the shooter had been apprehended. We waited for the police to let us know that it was safe to come out and to take our stations, but there was a pit in my stomach, still wondering what happened to whoever got shot. Thankfully, we learned that the police had gotten there and apprehended the man before anyone was injured. It turned out that the gunshots we heard were the gunman trying to shoot the handle of the door hoping to get in. But that's not how our emergency locks work, so he never ended up getting into the room. According to what we heard, the gunman was looking for someone who had been hospitalized after being shot in what was believed to be an alleged gang-related incident.